Everyone. Welcome to Citizen Digital, an ITIF web series where I speak with experts in the United States and around the world to explore how digital technology can improve citizen and customer experience. I'm Eric Egan, the Policy Fellow for Digital Government at ITIF, and with me today is Leslie Casson Stevens, Industry Advisor for U.S. Federal Market at SAP, an enterprise solution software provider. Leslie, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
So I thought we'd just start with you sharing a little bit about yourself and how you came to work in the space.
Sure. So I am an accountant by training. I started my career in public accounting and moved into management consulting. And in that role, I got my first exposure to working with the government and ended up implementing financial management systems in several government agencies, which ultimately led me to taking on the controllership at the Smithsonian Institution, and then moved to SAP when SAP decided to enter the US federal space. So I came on board to be essentially a subject matter expert on what the software would need to be able to do to meet the requirements in the federal space. I've been here ever since.
Yeah, you come with a wealth of experience. So I'm curious, given SAP's history as providing more of what you would think of as kind of back office solutions in government, I'm curious to get your definition of what citizen or customer experience with government kind of looks like, particularly in the role that digital technology plays in that experience, and kind of how you think about that, especially from kind of the SAP perspective.
Well, when you say the term citizen experience, I think a lot of us tend to think about a direct interaction between a citizen and a government. And actually, there's all kinds of things that are part of that citizen experience that may not involve that direct interaction. For instance, having the roads and trails in the national park maintained in a safe and usable way is contributing directly to citizen experience. So, citizen experience and digital technology, there are so many ways that digital technology has an impact on that experience for the citizen. That may be all the way from things like doing contracting. So if I'm in a hurricane, right, and FEMA provides me a temporary home, there's a contract behind the scenes, right, making that happen. The government worker who is out there providing assistance, there's a system back there somewhere paying them. So citizen experience really is impacted all the way back through the back office.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even thinking, that's totally true, even when you're talking about citizens, kind of like the everyday person. But certainly if you apply that to customer experience broadly, I mean, federal customers are everything, it's businesses, it's other federal agencies, it's other state and local agencies. And so there's so much there that it's, the headlines mostly stick to like filing your taxes and like, Medicare.
Right. The states for sure are one of the biggest customers of the federal government. A lot of our federal tax dollars flow to the states and ultimately make their way to the citizen.
Yeah, no, very true. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that at some point today. But so yeah, many of our supporters or listeners are federal service providers, and so one of the questions I wanted to ask was how you go about thinking of federal agencies as your customers. How do you go about tapping into those customer needs, in a manner that supports their missions, and as we were saying, maybe several steps removed, but indirectly all effectively citizen needs as well.
Well, the first and most important thing that I do personally, and many of us do, right, is to listen and understand. And that's a big part of my job, is to try and understand what the government agency is trying to accomplish and how digital technology can be applied to that problem. And it can be a challenge, and I really learned this from my time at the Smithsonian. Government employees are very risk averse. They want to do the right thing. They don't want to break any laws. They want to make sure nobody gets sent up on Capitol Hill to answer for something that went wrong. So it takes it takes encouragement both from the outside provider, like us at SAP, who may have an alternate way to accomplish the same end. And it also takes internal advocates inside the government that have the courage, right, and the tenacity to help their their employees realize that it's okay, right? It's going to be okay to do something a little differently. Um, but that's again back to listening and understanding, and then I have to translate that back to SAP on the other side of the equation to make sure that they understand why certain things have to be the way they are, and why
Mm.
that enables the government to carry out its mission.
Yeah, and kind of you're hitting on a point there around the risk averse nature of government and kind of cultural issues that are not really conducive to like working in the digital era. And it kind of leads me to my next question. At SAP, you have kind of a unique perspective of having really, you do so much even in the commercial space as well, but working at the different levels of government in the United States. What are some of the major challenges and barriers to digital transformation? And maybe this is from the perspective of being a service provider, or even just broadly. So you hit on a few there, being kind of risk averse, and how do you get when emerging technologies come so quickly, and government needs to react faster than they are. How do you manage those kind of challenges, or are the challenges that you see when you work with government?
Yeah, there are challenges in many areas. Certainly, the culture is one. Although I feel with the new generation coming in, right, they're more accustomed to working with technology. They're more accustomed to turning on their phone and having something and how they interact with it change overnight without training and without notice, in essence. So I think that as that younger digital native generation becomes more and more of the workforce,
Mhm.
that some of that culture will begin to evolve. Some of the other challenges are the funding mechanisms. So if a corporation wants to invest, right, in digital technology to improve their ability, their profitability, or whatever, they can make a decision, right, to make a capital investment, and they have mechanisms to fund that, whether that be borrowing or issuing stock. There's a lot of avenues that they have to make
Yeah.
that investment. Our federal agencies don't have that ability. They need to go to Congress and ask for the money, and that can be a 3 to 5 year process.
Hmm.
Given the pace of change, you can see how that can be problematic. And once that funding is is gotten, is obtained,
Hmm.
then the contracting process to get the technology and the solution providers on board can be another year or more. And those contracting agreements sometimes can make it very difficult to do what I call course corrections as you move through
Hmm.
a project. Nobody can anticipate everything that's going to happen over the course of a implementation of a digital technology. And as the customer learns, right, there may be different paths than what they originally anticipated that are the right way to go. And it can be very challenging to make those adjustments and do the right thing.
Yeah, some great points there. One being it's almost well known and best practice at this day, this day and age, where if you're thinking about the way to develop digital technologies or software, you in fact you need flexibility. If you're doing it from a way that is leveraging service design and product management and those kinds of things, it's the whole, or agile, all the things that really the commercial sector is doing really well. They have an kind of they have an approach in which that has adaptability and flexibility baked in, because you just never know. Years in advance, when you think that you have a solution, or you need this particular type of software, by the time you start building it, things could change, the customer's needs could change, and if you're forcing it along a set of requirements or a contract that you you got funding for, at a federal agency years ago, then you're doomed to fail. You're basically creating old software, and that's the best you could do. It's very frustrating. I think that's certainly to me one of the biggest barriers. And how do you go about changing that? But I'm also curious. Maybe that's a second question. But another question I was curious about was the one something I've researched and written about lately is around the Technology Modernization Fund, and this kind of more different approach to funding IT initiatives in the federal space that's kind of like a loan. So it's a different avenue. You don't have to go through Congress to get even up to millions in funding. You can work through this working capital fund that in theory you pay back, but the way that you pay back can also be flexible in terms of like, here's how this technology will save money once it's implemented, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be like, you write us a check, we write you a check in 5 years or something. What are your thoughts? Is there should be more of that? I mean, it's the Technology Modernization Fund still is not, it's, I think at most has had like $2 billion, which sounds like a lot, but in federal government that's spending like $100 billion every year on their efforts, then like that's really not that much. Do you think, is that something that, should it work more like that? I guess some people might have concerns that agencies are less accountable to that kind of funding as opposed through Congress. What are your thoughts on?
Right. So, as a citizen, right, I was excited to see the Technology Modernization Fund idea come forward, number one, and actually get put in place. Where the rub is, right, is how it actually functions. And I think there were customers of ours, right, when we suggested, hey, maybe this is something you could request TMF funding for, what are your thoughts on that? And this was a couple years ago, but there was some hesitancy from some of the agencies that had been the early awardees under the TMF, that the oversight and reporting required, they felt in some cases, was a greater burden than the money was worth. So I think the idea of the TMF is awesome because agencies are funded, particularly those that don't have a big working capital fund or whatever, right? They're funded on an annual basis for normal operating costs. And to get a big investment funded is really, really challenging. And yet, if they don't get it, right, then they end up with outdated technology. And ultimately, it's going to cost the government more in terms of inefficient processes, security risks, you name it. So I really think there should be a means for funding technology in the government that is different from the regular appropriations process. The government needs to just view it as an investment that needs to be continually refreshed. And I don't think that mechanism exists very well today.
Yeah.
Even with the TMF.
Yeah. No, that's a great point and really interesting to hear because it's just like another example of a good idea, but still using kind of outdated federal ways of working, which is like, oh, but you still need a bunch of like status reports or like the oversight mechanisms. There's like, well, this is just the same. Like we're now being constrained again in another contract where we don't have the kind of flexibility. It's like it might as well have just been like an appropriation,
Yeah. Well, and I think the original idea of the repayment rate that I think proved to be maybe a little naive in that a good investment doesn't necessarily automatically reduce costs somewhere. There's a value in improving outcomes. And so that repayment idea, I think, was a little problematic. And I know they've made that more flexible and more adaptable as they've learned with that. But maybe some new ways to measure what the benefit of an investment in technology provides.
Yeah, particularly in government, right? I mean, you're not dealing with bottom lines and things. You're like the measures of success are often intangible or very difficult to measure because you're talking about like, I don't know, I mean, it could even be like wait time, I suppose, in customer is measurable, but it really is hard to quantify certain ROIs when you're not just talking about money. But I am glad that it frequently, at least in the TMF, those conversations of, oh, this could never have been feasible from like a classic repayment scheme. It always had to be with government. The way that you think about the repayment or the ROI on these investments has to be more flexible and mission oriented.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, that federal agency there's so few that are like revenue generating. That's
right. Well, and even if they are, in most cases, those revenues aren't theirs, right? They collect them,
right. Yeah.
and turn them over to the Treasury. So
right. Yeah, they go to a general fund. That's not even. Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious. Then, I mean, there were some, I guess, negative aspects here. But as someone who's worked in the space for so long, are there any like what are the positive things that you're seeing in either federal IT modernization, government digital transformation broadly, if it's funding, if it's maybe openness to change, and anything that you can point to and be like, when you started X plus years ago, now I'm happy that it's we're at least made some progress.
yeah, no, I think there's some great things happening. And if you look back to the early 2000s, when, at least from like an SAP perspective, a lot of our customers implemented ERP software.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I think the mindset in most agencies was, I need an integrator to come in here and make this commercial product mimic my existing processes. And in so doing, right, they customized these commercial products to the point that they became very expensive to maintain. They were very difficult to even accept new releases and upgrades from the software provider. And so they sub-optimized, right, what that software could have done for them. I think that perspective has changed, and that's very refreshing. We now hear from our customers that their objective will be to adopt the best practices in the software, and if that requires changing a regulation or a policy, they're expressing an interest and willingness in doing that because they understand that they sort of customize themselves into a box in the past. And, we try to encourage our customers only to customize if it's something that provides critical, in a commercial world, competitive advantage for you as a company. And, likewise in the government, something that has a material impact on your ability to deliver on your mission, then yes, that's probably a legitimate place to customize. But if it's just because it's the way you've always done it, I think there's more willingness now to question that status quo. So that's terrific.
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, for those of us who like work in digital transformation, that the idea isn't that digital transformation is an organization using digital tools. It really is supposed to be a transformation in the way that they do everything. So, and we're really rethinking the role that digital plays in truly transforming the way they think about, their business processes and everything. So it's good to hear that there is some room there, that it's not just, oh, let's use a website, or oh, let's just have a case management system or something like that. Let's stick to the old. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the pandemic helped us too on that front, right? Where you had a process maybe where somebody had to walk a folder around a building or sign a paper form. I think that kick-started some willingness to change because they had to. And I think that has been one of those cases where they sort of jumped in and found out that, the water's fine. So I've been excited to see across government in the finance area, adoption pretty much across the board of things like robotic process automation. So I think there's more comfort now in using that kind of technology. And I'm super excited to see what's coming, like in our products and in the industry with uh, with AI, right? And
Mm,
its its promise, we're building it into the base business processes, and the I think the introduction that the government's had with more basic RPA is going to make it easier for them to adopt AI being a tool that can make their jobs easier, make their employees more effective, and start um, taking some of the mundane work off their plates.
yeah.
So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe like, the silver lining of COVID, maybe accelerating digital transformation in some way is interesting. And I know we're already running low on time, but I did want to give you some time to kind of mention any of maybe you've got some good, COVID related projects or really any impactful projects. I mean, you have a wealth of experience to pull from here, from, anything you want to kind of share or you think is worth highlighting, given the, kind of the conversation we've had.
Okay, thanks. So I think one of the things that we've seen in commercial industry, and not as much in government, but in some cases, that when you can deliver an end-to-end business process in a technology platform, um, without having to go in and out of multiple systems, you can adapt much more quickly. You can be more effective. And
Mm,
we saw that in the pandemic with one of our customers at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They had a system in place for uh, probably at least 15 plus years, that
mm,
they supply chain system that SAP technology is underneath that supported the childhood vaccine program in the US. So this was the purchase and distribution of all the childhood vaccines that were government funded.
mm,
When the need came to distribute the COVID vaccine, they were able to quickly expand that system. They didn't have to do a whole lot of work to enable the distribution and control of the COVID vaccines across the country. You probably didn't hear anything about it, which is
mhm.
great because it worked. Um, and we were able to get in and help them stress test to make sure it was going to work before they flipped the switch. But that one I think is a great example of the ordering mechanism, from the order mechanism all the way through to the inventory and distribution. Um, it worked very well. And that's an interesting case of where the government also relied on its industry partners, not just us for software, but like the McKessons of the world who distributed the
Yeah.
product, or the pharmaceutical manufacturers. So it was a great example of how technology can respond quickly to a critical situation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and it's also a good example of something we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, which is the ways in which so much is happening behind the scenes, process wise, technology wise, to deliver for people, for citizens, and even if it seems like, as you were saying, that system VTrax is operating totally behind the scenes. No one receiving a COVID vaccine will know what it is, or but
That's right.
it's so critical to the supply chain of getting these. And as someone who worked at Texas, the state and local level during, as a service provider like yourself, it was the way that we were able to adapt to, the state of Texas had existing, immunization registries. They had a provider kind of portal. They had these different mechanisms in place that they had to quickly change and adapt. And one of them was, when I was at Deloitte, was creating a new vaccine allocation and ordering system that worked with VTrax in order to get those. It's interesting, this ecosystem of like collaboration between
Hmm.
industry partners and government that can happen very, very quickly. So we know that it's possible. Like the level of adaptability and digital transformation could totally take place. And again, as we said, kind of a silver lining to COVID. Very bad
Yeah, no, there
situation,
were
but allowed people to
definitely some
rise to it.
good things that came out of it.
Yeah.
And they're gearing up now to take on the the new RSV vaccine. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's exciting, and there are all kinds of opportunities like that. We have, another program that um, distributes all the supply chain for the food aid that the U.S. provides,
Mm,
both to the all the school lunch programs across the
yeah.
country, and the food aid that the U.S. provides internationally goes through a system that handles like the VTRAX from soup to nuts of ordering the
Yeah.
demand coming in, the commodities being procured and distributed.
Oh, that's very cool. Literally soup to nuts too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my last question is kind of a standard question. And I think you kind of hit on it a little bit with when you're talking about AI and RPA, but what most excites you about digital experiences in government service delivery moving forward? This could be on the more obvious citizen facing side, or it could be a lot of what may be happening behind the scenes at SAPCs.
I think the promise of the technology, and now also of the cloud. So,
Mm,
we're all experiencing, right, the world moving to a cloud framework, and that that delivery model, right, really has the potential to, I think, allow the government to do its job more effectively, because the our systems are under attack, right, every day.
mhm,
And um, the skills that are needed to protect them are hard to find, right, and in high demand. And there's a core competency, right, that the cloud providers have to carry out that security role, that then the government doesn't need to take that burden on and can use its
mhm.
own resources and focus them on activities that help them deliver on their mission. The other thing the cloud, I think, really brings to the table is agility and continuous innovation. That
Mm.
for the funding and contracting and all these other reasons we've discussed, a lot of that goes away when you're in the cloud in a SaaS type solution, where the solution owner makes sure that product stays up to date, that it's maintained in a way that allows it to take updates and adapt new innovations. So I think that is going to have a real impact for the government, and its ability to adapt technology and innovate.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and yeah, it kind of makes sense from SAP's point of view, right? You're able to see that level of the level of cloud adoption happening on the private sector that's paying such dividends, and for a lot of folks, cloud has been around for a while, but the government is still very much behind in its
Well, and
adoption. So
it actually allows us to get better bang for our own investments, because with the old on-premise world, we were maintaining and still do, right, many versions of our software under many different operating models. So all that investment now can be repurposed into innovation as we
mm,
move to delivery through the cloud. So I think it's good for everyone.
yeah, absolutely. A great point. All right. Well, I believe that's all the time we have for this episode. I want to thank Leslie again for joining us, and for our audience, don't forget to subscribe to ITF on YouTube for other great videos covering a wide variety of topics in tech policy. And thanks and goodbye.
Thank you.